Welcome to No Holding Back with me, Susan Estrich, the podcast where I bring you the biggest names from the worlds of media, politics, and law. We dive into unfiltered, unapologetic, unrehearsed conversations. I speak my mind, and I encourage my guests to do the same. No topic is off limits as we dive into the issues that shape our world. I can't believe it's 2025. I really can't. I want to wish you and all my listeners a very happy and a very healthy new year. I come to you live from Los Angeles, where it's burning, and we really remember what matters in life. Today, we have the pleasure and honor of speaking with Christy Jackson, a distinguished political commentator, political strategist, party chairman, a public servant, and an advocate for community advancement. Chris's journey in public service began at the grand old age of 19 years old when he was elected to the Lawrence County, Tennessee Commission, making him the youngest person ever to have elected office in Lawrence County, Tennessee. During his tenure, he was elected chairman pro tem for 7 years, leading initiatives that resulted in record low unemployment rates, improved student graduation rates, and significant investments in economic development, education, and infrastructure. Sounds like Joe Biden to me, Chris. Beyond his time on the commission, Chris has served as an election commissioner for Lawrence County in Tennessee and has brought enormous experience to the whole issue of elections. Chris, thanks so much for joining us today. We were supposed to have you around Christmas time. You ended up in the hospital. We're glad to see you looking great today. Happy New Year.
Same to you, Susan. Thank you for the invite.
I love your signs. Thank you, Joe. Vote blue. And Kennedy, John Kennedy for president. Tell me what you think of Joe Biden and his legacy.
Well, Susan, I think Joe Biden is going to kind of be in the mold of a Harry Truman and Lyndon Johnson. Both of those guys left office with pretty low approval ratings. The president's is around 40%, so they're similar in that regard. And I think their stature and their legacy only grew over the decades after they left office. People begin to appreciate once they see the things that the president's done. A lot of the initiatives that President Biden has undertaken since he's been in office won't come to fruition until years after he leaves. That's the bad part about it. People won't see that until he's gone. But, he's going to be an interesting character in history because he's going to be sandwiched between two what I think are going to be chaotic and really embarrassing terms by Donald Trump. And Joe Biden will be in between there as a man of integrity, a man who did his job. He found a country that was flat on its back during COVID. He rebuilt the economy, made investments in infrastructure, climate change, a lot of forward-thinking things, and he left office without any controversy. I mean, he's going to be the first president in some time to not have any person in his administration indicted. And we take that for granted nowadays, but it's a pretty big deal when the guy that is replacing him is as corrupt as Donald Trump. So I think Joe Biden, it's only going to grow over the years, and I think he'll be a top 10, top 15 president once all said and done.
But he's got a Trump sandwich on his plate. I mean, he's the middle of the Trump sandwich, and the Trump sandwich is a pretty, if you ask me, not a very tasty sandwich indeed. How come he was so unpopular? Was he unpopular down in Tennessee?
Oh yeah, any Democrat is unpopular in Tennessee.
Not you.
Well, it's something to be said about the politics that we live in now. The people that help regions and states like Tennessee the most are typically Democrats. We're the people that make the investments in social programs that help the underserved and things of that nature. And it would take somebody a lot better with psychology than me to explain that. But, I think Biden is a lot like a lot of incumbents around the globe. We just saw Trudeau in Canada, extremely low approval ratings. Macron in France, extremely low approval ratings. The prime minister or the chancellor in Germany, very low approval ratings. So Biden, I think he took office during a tough time. And, there's never a good answer to why prices are high. A president really doesn't have any control over that. He did the best he could. with bringing inflation down. It got up to what, 8 or 9%, and now
Yeah.
it's 3%. So, he's leaving a record of accomplishment across the board. But I just think the environment across the globe, people are so unsettled and angry, they take it out on the incumbents.
What are they angry about, the way you see it, Chris? I mean, you've been in politics since you were a
Yeah,
toddler, practically by my count. What are
yeah,
people so angry about? Because Joe Biden is, I agree with you. I think he did a solid job as president, but he's
yeah,
not given credit for it, and they're really angry at him.
yeah.
And numbers were terrible.
Yeah, Susan, I don't know. I really can't explain, what causes that. I know there's a lot of anger around the price of food, the price of gas, the price of eggs. People were angry because of COVID, the lockdowns. And I understand that a lot. People lost their jobs. Uh, Businesses were shut down. But nobody was at fault for that. This is a once in a lifetime pandemic and people were making the best of it, that they could. But when you have somebody that is like Donald Trump and is so good at fomenting anger and grievance, you see him and Elon Musk and all these other folks around the globe, they figured out that populism works, and it's hell of a lot easier to be against things than it is to be for things. And it's just one of those give and takes, I think. We saw it with Obama. When he left office, people were looking for the opposite of Obama for whatever reason. So they went with Donald Trump. And then they were looking the opposite of Donald Trump, and they went to Joe Biden. And the pendulum has swung back now. So we'll see. But I don't have very high hopes for Donald Trump changing. He's an 80-year-old man. The media always likes to say this is a change in tone of Donald Trump, blah, blah, blah. But
Blah,
the
blah,
guy
blah.
is who
What's
he is.
changed? Do you
Nothing.
see any change?
The press conference yesterday, I think Donald Trump showed us again who he is. There was no talk about lowering prices or, helping the middle class. It was nonsense. Talking about his grievances, the court cases against him, and buying Greenland and threatening our allies. Who the hell threatens Denmark over
Well, what is
Greenland?
going on with that? I mean, what is Denmark, Greenland? I mean, I never knew of anything about Greenland other than it was a stop on the way when you were
Yeah,
flying somewhere.
it's bizarre. And this is where I think Joe Biden's legacy is only going to get better because Joe Biden, another thing that he did while he was in office, he rebuilt NATO. Donald Trump basically frayed all of our allies while he was in office, and Joe Biden came in and rebuilt NATO. NATO's as strong as it ever has been, confronting Putin in Ukraine. And now Joe Biden is leaving office, and Donald Trump's coming in and already picking a fight with Denmark over, uh, this. So it makes no sense to me why we've got bigger fish to fry in this country. He's talking about that and renaming the Gulf of Mexico the Gulf of America. It's just silly crap like that that is going to wear down on people pretty quickly.
But people, I mean, I hate to say it, but people seem to fall for this kind of crap. I mean, it's
Short term,
you
they
have
do.
those thank you, Joe. Nobody's saying thank you, Joe, right now, are
Yeah.
they?
Well, some people are. I think Democrats are thankful for Joe Biden. I think rational people are thankful for Joe Biden, but people that do not pay attention, and that again, that's most people. Most people are just out living their lives, paycheck to paycheck, going to their kids' ball games. They're not following the minutia of politics and things. And when Donald Trump says he's going to lower prices, he's going to end all the wars before he takes office, it sounds good, but it's not rational. You know just as well as I do, if it was easy, it would already been done. So, I think people are going to have buyer's remorse once again. This guy, we've seen the playbook before, make big promises, and then he'll come in and blame somebody else when it doesn't happen. If he succeeds in some areas, I applaud that. I think we should root for the president to succeed, but I'm not too confident that he's going to do that.
What do you think of his appointment so far?
I think he thinks he has a mandate.
Does he?
And I think he won. We first
He
need to
did
admit,
win. I mean,
yeah,
the majority of the American people, he won the popular vote. He won the
sure,
electoral college handily. He won.
absolutely.
I mean, what do we do about that?
Well, there's nothing you can do. I'm glad that Joe Biden, after right the day after the election, called him and invited him to the White House, and we have some sense of normalcy there. But the appointment so far, we started out with Matt Gaetz, and of
I
course,
know. Can you believe that?
well, I can believe it, but it kind of ended the way we all thought it would. At least Gates has pulled out, but you still have people like Hedgeseth and Tulsi Gabbard, folks like that 4 or 5 years ago we would have laughed at if you said that they were going to be over our national security and our defense. I mean, hell, they're weekend host on Fox News, and
I
somebody.
know. I worked on Fox News for 20 years. And if you told me being a Fox News host was a qualification for being Secretary of Defense, I would have thought you were kidding.
Oh, it's nuts, and you have Robert Kennedy, who is a joke even in his own family, for the crazy things that he says. He's going to be over the United States health. It's scary because, after we went through the pandemic, we saw how quickly these transmissible diseases can spread, and you have the bird flu that's starting to come out, and you know, you're always just one thing away from a big disaster. And some of the views that Kennedy holds scares me in that regard, especially around vaccines and things of that nature.
And what's going to happen? Are there going to be Republicans from the South, for instance, who are going to stand up to Trump, or are they just going to all raise their hands and vote for these people?
Well, I think the South is totally gone. We have people like Marsha Blackburn in Tennessee, where Trump can do no wrong. You have Rick Scott down in Florida. You basically have a sycophantic faction of the Republican Party now running the country. At least when Trump was in office the first time, you had people like Mitt Romney and a few rational voices in the Senate that would put a check on him. But now I think he's free to do whatever he wants to, unless that, maybe he could pick off like a Bill Cassidy. We could pick off him in one of these confirmation hearings, but they have 53 seats. The Democrats dropped the ball. I thought we were going to be more competitive than we were in states like Ohio. I thought Sherrod Brown would eke that out. I was
Yeah,
hoping
so did
John
I.
Tester would
What
win.
what went wrong there, Chris? I mean, I really thought that we were going to do better in the Senate and better in the House, frankly, and we
It was
didn't.
just I think we're all surprised. I definitely thought we were going to take back the House. I was anticipating a Speaker Jeffries.
Yeah, me too.
I wish we would have, because Speaker Johnson's way in over his head. The guy barely won the speakership again. They had to hold the vote open for an hour this week just to wrangle them in, and they have a small majority in the House. I think that may be the thing that saves the Democrats and the rest of the country is the House. Because the Senate, they have 53 votes. They have a little bit of cushion to play with, but in the House, you only have a few seats that you can lose, and you already have several open seats with Gates resigning and whatnot. So, these guys can't even agree on what time of the day is most of the time, and they're in the same party. So maybe the dysfunction in the House will save us, but it's their baby to lose now. They're
But
solely in charge.
it terrifies me that you have Elon Musk sitting there
Yeah.
with more money than God, literally, and threatening anybody who doesn't vote the way Elon Musk, the president-elect, wants them to vote. He'll run a primary campaign and throw hundreds of $1 million against them. Who's going to stand up to that in our politics?
Well, that's what I'm waiting on, Susan. That's one thing that is, I guess, discouraged me the most is the effect that Elon Musk and all these other billionaires have had on our campaigns the last year or two. Uh, um, since he took over X, it's basically an echo chamber. The amount of misinformation that's put out there on a daily basis, amplified mostly by him.
By
You know,
him, he goes
yeah,
online 62 times a day and
yeah.
posts. How does this guy have a life? How does he run a business when he's posting all the time?
I guess it's the ketamine that keeps him going. I don't know, um, but
Maybe we all should try it. I don't know.
I mean, hell, he's got all these followers, and I don't follow him, but he shows up on my feed constantly, and I know he probably does everybody else's. So, that's amplified around, and now he's going after elected officials in Great Britain and around the
Right.
world.
In
Um,
Germany, he's going after the far right in Germany. align
Hmm.
himself with? I mean, this guy is on a megalomaniac, I don't know what trip. And Donald
Crazy.
Trump shows no signs of dropping him. Why would he? He's the enforcer.
Yeah, well, absolutely. I mean, Donald Trump doesn't have to do the dirty work now. Elon Musk is going to do it. He's going to do the blackmail, like you said. If they don't fall in line, he'll just dump millions and millions of dollars into his PAC, which will run a primary campaign against these folks. And where's the media? The media has basically bowed down to Trump now. You
Well,
see,
look at Jeff Bezos of the Washington Post. What do you say? You saw
yep,
the cartoon last week that the cartoonist is
yep,
resigned from the Post because they wouldn't run the cartoon of Jeff Bezos doing
right.
his paying fealty to
Oh,
Donald Trump. They were all giving $1 million.
yep.
Tim Cook gave $1 million. Mark
I mean,
Zuckerberg gave $1 million. They're financing his inauguration. They're
yep.
all just in line on their knees.
It's crazy to think back, 4 years ago after January 6th, we all thought Donald Trump was a pariah, and he would never make a comeback. And the Senate Republicans like Mitch McConnell really dropped the ball 4 years ago when they had the chance to do away with Donald Trump. If they would have voted for the impeachment and found him guilty, he never could have ran for office again. And, a lot of this is on Merrick Garland. I'm going to put it on him too. He took too long to investigate. He took too long to appoint a special counsel. And Donald Trump was smart enough to realize once it gets into a political season and he's a declared candidate, it's basically hands off. He played the system. And Democrats, we follow the law. Merrick Garland followed the law. And, once you're a candidate for president, it's like you're immune. And now that he is president, he does have immunity. So I don't know. It's very discouraging. We all laughed at Richard Nixon 30, 40 years ago when he did the interview and said, if the president does it, it's not illegal. It's basically the truth by the Supreme Court ruling now. You have one man in America that's above the law, and that's a damn shame, in my opinion.
Why didn't people care about those convictions? I mean, I followed the hush money case very carefully, and at first I thought, well, really, this is a business records case, and
Yeah,
maybe they have something of an argument that nobody gets prosecuted for falsifying business records. But what he was really trying to do was subvert an election, and
right.
that's a very serious crime. And he
Yep.
was convicted on 34 counts of trying to subvert that election. And yet people didn't care about it. Why not?
I can't figure that out. And that coupled with the documents case where he withheld the documents, not only did he have possession of the documents, he didn't return them when requested. And who knows with Donald Trump what he anticipated to do with those documents. We know
Show him
one,
off to somebody who was in his house, I guess. I don't know.
yeah.
What was he
I mean,
doing
we
to
know
those
one
documents?
he withheld because it contained information about Mark Milley. And, it's when a guy tries to overturn the will of an election, is indicted over that, is indicted over withholding classified documents and, trying to subvert the election by paying off a porn star so voters won't find out. I don't know what else you need to see. Donald Trump has told us who he is over and over and over again, but a faction of the American people, just won't see it. They refuse to believe it for whatever reason.
It's not just a faction, though, isn't it? I mean, it's look to your left, look to your right, look at
Yeah,
your dinner table. I mean, my kids don't talk to each other over politics. I have
I
a
have
son who's
members.
a Trumper and a daughter who's a diehard Democrat,
Yeah.
and I raised them both. I don't know what I did wrong.
I know I have the same problem in my family. Being in the South, I think a lot of Democrats have the issue, where we have close friends and close family members that are involved in this MAGA movement and they believe everything Donald Trump says. Even the people, what gets me is the people that are highly educated that still know better. They know he's lying. They know the things that he's putting forward are not realistic, but they convince themselves somehow that they have to go with it because he's on their team, or the Christian conservatives who defend this guy at every turn, and he exemplifies everything that the Bible teaches us how to treat people. It's bizarre.
It's bizarre. The conservatives, the Christian conservatives are really bizarre because You would think they would be offended by somebody like Donald Trump, whose casual attitudes towards sex, towards women, towards obscenity, towards porn stars. I mean,
Yeah.
you would think they would find everything about him offensive, and they don't. And it leads me to the question, what are we missing, Chris? I mean, we are missing something. Kamala Harris missed something. She misread her room. What did she do wrong?
I think the Democratic Party, in a lot of ways, has gone too far to the left. I'm not going to be critical of Kamala Harris or Joe Biden because I believe that they've done their jobs. I mean, I think they've done an outstanding job as president, vice president, but I think the party as a whole, when we talk about issues like uh, transgender sports, I didn't think that was a big deal.
Well,
It's not
why
a
are we
big deal to
talking
me.
about transgenders? I mean, the population of this country that's transgender is tiny. What are
Yeah.
we doing making that such a big issue?
I don't understand it. I personally don't. I don't have an issue with transgender rights, things of that nature. But, most Americans believe that, that transgender people shouldn't compete in sports that, the for the sex that they were born with. You know, Immigration was another big issue. But the border right now has lower border crossings than it did when Joe Biden took office. So I don't know. It's going to take a lot of study to look at this, but I think at the core of it, Democrats need to get back to talking in regular voices to people. I think a lot of times we talk over their heads or we talk about policy instead of the results of the policy, that affect everyday people. Like I said, a lot of these policies won't take effect till Joe Biden leaves office, but we're going to have to be a lot better at explaining it in the mode, kind of like Bill Clinton. Bill Clinton's a good explainer, and I think we can learn a lot from him. And I hope we look at people outside of the East and West Coast next election. I like Andy Bashir from Kentucky.
I do too.
I think he's a really good guy, can connect with everyday people, and he has a record of success in a red state. So I think some voices like that would be valuable on the national stage for the Democratic Party.
Who else do you like, Chris? I mean, you're young, you've got a great future ahead of you. What are you going
Yeah.
to run for?
I don't know. Tennessee's a red state, so I don't know if I would have much success. I'm kind of waiting until that pendulum swings back the other way. But on the national level, I like Bashir. I think Josh Shapiro in Pennsylvania is a real good guy. I think Whitmer would be a strong candidate. I even think Warnock and Ossoff from Georgia would be worth looking at. Both of those have won tough elections in Georgia, and both are young. Joe Biden had the unfortunate thing against him of being older.
Being old.
If Joe Biden would have been 10 years younger, I think he probably would have won re-election. For whatever reason, people thought Joe Biden was the only old guy in the race, when in fact Donald Trump was the same age and he's more corrupt. And I think he's more mentally unstable. But I think it would behoove Democrats probably to look at a generational candidate like a Bashir, like a Shapiro, that can bring new energy, new ideas to the party in 4 years.
I have to say, I was really sad for Joe Biden. I've known him for a really long time. I ran against him in '88. We used to call him Uncle Joe because he
Yeah,
was the nicest guy in the race. He was everybody's Uncle Joe.
yeah,
And yet, there was something about him. He ran for president, I don't know how many times, and lost. He came in and said he would be a transitional figure. He
yeah,
won the Ruth Bader Ginsburg Award for staying too long. Had he dropped out and said, I'm not going to run for another term, some of those folks you mentioned might have been in a Democratic primary. Maybe
yeah,
Kamala would have won, maybe she wouldn't have. But we would have had a candidate who had time, who went through
right.
the process, proved themselves, and then had time to win an election. And instead, Biden just stayed too long, didn't he?
Well, I supported him staying in.
Did you?
I'm from a day one Joe Biden supporter, and I make no apologies for it. I think it would have been difficult for any Democrat to win. Looking at this electorate this year, people were so angry. Kamala Harris ran basically a flawless campaign in the 100 plus days that she ran. I don't know what else she could have done. And, it makes me wonder if people just were looking for change. Like I said earlier, a lot of these change elections are just hard to go for. I think Joe Biden thought that when he announced for reelection that everything that he'd accomplished would be the forefront of the race, which it should have been. But Donald Trump made it something else. I'll give Trump credit that he's good at doing that. He's good at, making people believe that things are terrible when in fact, right now we have the strongest country in the world economically, as far as our defense. And that wasn't what Joe Biden inherited 4 years ago. Joe Biden inherited, like I said, a country flat on its back. People were dying with COVID. Our defense was lagging because our allies were afraid. So, Donald Trump's going to inherit a hell of a lot better country than he left Joe Biden.
What are you most afraid of, Chris, looking at the next 2 years?
I'm afraid that Donald Trump is going to do what I expect him to do and basically go after the middle class. A lot of the safety nets that Democrats have put into place for disadvantaged and middle class people, whether it be Social Security or Medicare, the Affordable Care Act, rolling back provisions in the Build Back Better program that Joe Biden put in place around helping seniors, capping, the cost of insulin. Those are things that have made a real difference in people's lives. And when you hear about Republicans in Congress talking about block granting Medicare and Medicaid and sending it back to the states and, doing away with Obamacare, those are things that scare me, because those can ruin people's lives. If you don't have health insurance, you get sick, it can ruin somebody financially. I mean, I've been blessed to have health insurance. I've had
Well,
three
you've had a
surgeries.
tough year. Has your health insurance covered everything? Because I have to tell you, most of us have health insurance, and I've been going through this with my daughter who has long
Yeah,
COVID, and it doesn't cover anything. Doesn't cover out of state care, doesn't cover
yeah.
this. This is experimental. This hasn't been proven. This needs pre-authorization. I mean, sometimes I feel like an insurance company executive trying to, deal with these. I'm a lawyer. I mean, you
Yeah.
have to be a Harvard Law School professor to know how to deal with an insurance company. It's insane.
It shouldn't be that hard, Susan, to get the care that you need in this country. We're the most wealthy country in the world. We should be doing better. But I've been blessed. I have good insurance. It hasn't paid the whole thing. Like I said, I've had three surgeries on my leg the last year and medical bills totaling over $200,000. But my insurance has paid a great deal of that. So I'm
But you've
blessed.
been left with the rest. I mean, how can an
Yeah,
average person afford
that's the problem.
$200,000 worth of hospital care?
You couldn't, and we're lucky in this country to have what we have, the safety nets like Social Security and Medicare and Medicaid for the disadvantaged. And when Republicans start tinkering with those, it only takes one little mistake tinkering with a program like that to ruin a lot of lives. And Donald Trump and Republicans are just arrogant enough to try that. They tried it with Obamacare, and thankfully, John
They almost
McCain was there.
repealed it. I mean,
Yeah,
you
I
had
mean,
John McCain coming to
one
the floor of
vote.
the Senate, one vote.
I mean, they could very well try it again. But Obamacare, is very popular. It kind of proves my point. What I was saying about the policies that Joe Biden's put into place, a lot of them haven't taken root yet for people to see. And that's kind of the way Obamacare was when Obama left office. It really hadn't got off the ground.
No,
But
that's
now,
absolutely right. You're
but,
absolutely right. And
but
now they
now
call
that,
it the Affordable Care Act instead of Obamacare. So
yeah.
you know it must be popular.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean that makes all the difference in the world. And once Republicans go back to their very conservative areas, that when they listen, they find out that people like these programs that Democrats have put into place. And people are going to have to make their voices heard over the next 4 years because I'm afraid that they are going to come for these programs that a lot of people rely on. And when they do, we need to make sure that we're united and Democrats are going to have to get their act together. We're going to have to do better on social media and podcasts like yours because the media is a dying form, the traditional media. Newspapers are gone.
They're
Radio is
gone.
going out. The what people pay attention to now, for better or for worse, is social media, podcast, and other alternative media, and I think Democrats have a lot of work to do in those areas.
How do we do that work? Chris, you're young. You're
Yeah,
part of this generation that needs to take over the Democratic Party. Frankly, I'm amazed at the number of people I still know who are at the highest levels of the party and are my age.
yeah.
And it's time for us to pass the baton a little bit, don't you think?
Well, you said a little bit. I think that's right because I think we still need folks like you and people from Joe Biden's era because there is wisdom that comes with age, and we haven't been through a lot of the things that you guys went through in the 80s and 90s, and we need that wisdom. But younger people are going to have to step up, and it was really discouraging to see a lot of young people go for Donald Trump this time.
I
That was
know. How do you explain that? I thought young women were going to save Kamala Harris. I really did. I'm a skeptic. I'm a cynic. I was afraid she was going to lose all along. But that
yeah.
last weekend, I thought, really, this is the time for young people and young women in particular to get out there and elect themselves a president. And they
Yeah.
didn't come.
It was very discouraging. Like you, I thought that the women vote would be enough to push her over the top, but Donald Trump made just enough inroads with younger people, just enough inroads with Latinos to make a difference, and we lost the popular vote for the first time in 20 years.
Yep.
It was just a cataclysmic failure for the party across the board, not taking back the House, losing seats in the Senate. It's not something that's irreparable because we're within striking distance still. There's nothing that's wrong with the party that can't be fixed, but we're going to have to get our act together because Donald Trump, I believe he is a danger to democracy. I believe that the policies that the Republicans are putting forward are dangerous for working people. So, we're going to have to be the defenders of the working class again, get back to our roots, like, Lunch Pail Joe that he was called, and Bill Clinton, and, all those values that we've stood for over the years, and start talking about those instead of talking about cultural issues all the time and wanting to fight culture wars because a lot of times we lose those.
What other cultural issues? There's the transgender issue. What other cultural issues do you think we're losing, Chris?
The abortion issue kind of surprised me. I thought it was going to be a lot more decisive in the election than what it was. I'm firmly pro-choice. I could never personally have an abortion, but I believe we need that enshrined, that right for women to make that decision with their doctors. It's not my decision. Shouldn't be a governor's decision or a president's decision
No, it
what a
shouldn't be
woman
a
does.
judge's decision either. It should be a woman and her doctor and her husband and her minister and her
That's
rabbi
right.
and whoever else she chooses to listen to. But
Absolutely.
certainly she shouldn't have to go to a judge to get permission or be bleeding in a parking lot. But we use that issue. I mean, the
Yeah.
Democrats tried to use that issue, and it just didn't strike home with younger women the way I thought it would, quite
Yeah,
frankly.
me either. I thought after the 2022 midterms, which it did, that
It
was kind of
did.
a galvanizing thing for turnout among Democrats and young people and women, but it just didn't carry the day, and I don't know if it was Donald Trump being on the ballot that kind of neutralized it. And you saw polls leading into the election day that even a majority of people, or at least a plurality of people, didn't blame Donald Trump for Roe being overturned, which
I
is
know.
crazy.
I know. And he appointed those justices and he came in and took credit for it. I
Yeah, I
mean,
mean, he basically said it out of his own mouth. I'm the father of the pro-life movement. I'm the one that appointed the judges, and people's like, no, we're not going to give you credit for that. I don't understand it. There's a disconnect there. The guy
what are
gets
you
a
going to
pass
do
on a
for the
lot of
next
things.
2 years to make a difference? What do you
Pardon
say to
me?
people? What are you going to do for the next 2 years to make a difference? What do you say to young people who say to you, Chris, what should we do now?
Well, I'm going to be trying to lead, or at least be part of a movement that takes the Democratic Party in a direction, like I said, in a vision with kind of people like Andy Bashir that is more of a moderate looking vision for the party. Get back to bread and butter issues like the economy, focusing on issues that help everyday people. Getting into these communities where people may not agree with us, but we need to talk to them because we can't lose rural counties like we have here in Tennessee, 80 to 20. Uh,
80
you
to
know,
20, we're losing them, right?
Yes, and even in Pennsylvania, Susan, it's not going to make a difference in Tennessee. A Democrat's not going to win Tennessee anytime soon. But when you lose counties in Pennsylvania 80-20 that are rural areas, you can't solely rely on Pittsburgh and Philadelphia to bail us out every time. We've got to get back in those communities. I mean, it was a shock to me. I guess the most shocking race in the last year was Bill Casey losing. I
Yep.
mean, I never expected that. I thought it may be close, but I didn't expect him to lose. He's an institutional name there. But it just goes to show you that Democrats are not viewed as being in touch in states like Pennsylvania that have that rural urban divide. And we just didn't have enough votes in the urban to win those elections.
Right. And we're getting no votes in the rural areas. How do you
Oh,
get votes
absolutely
in the
not.
rural areas?
You know, I guess years ago when, you were running a presidential campaign, we were pretty competitive in states like Tennessee. We even won it. I think Bill Clinton was the last to really do
Right.
well in the South. But now, we've written off half the country. We don't even compete in areas in the other half that we think disagree with us. And, I even think John Fetterman's got a point in Pennsylvania.
Yep.
He's trying to triangulate a way, I believe, to message to people in the other party that Democrats are not crazy. We're not out of touch. And, we do have the policies that will help them. And I think I don't agree with him as much on being supportive of some of the Trump nominees for the cabinet as much,
Hmm.
but his outlook as far as the party, I think, has some credence to it.
So what would you do if somebody were to make you party chair tomorrow? What would you do to rebuild the Democratic Party?
I think we're going to have to invest in our state parties first and foremost. I think Jamie Harrison did a pretty good job. I'm not going to bash Jamie Harrison. The Democratic Party for the last 4 years had pretty good success. We won in 20, we won in 22. One of the most successful midterms ever. 20 was just, something that I don't think any of us were expecting how bad it was going to go. But I would invest heavily in state parties, especially in these areas that are competitive, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Michigan. I would invest in younger people to help lead these parties because, like you said, I think it's time for my generation to step up and take charge in politics or at least be more in the game. I mean, we only have one or two millennials elected to Congress where
Yeah.
you still have people like Chuck Grassley, who's 90, making decisions. I mean, they talk
I
about Joe
mean, we get
Biden.
people voting from the nursing homes.
Yeah, Joe Biden's 82 and Chuck Grassley just turned 91 or 92, but that's okay apparently. But that's another story for another day. But and I would invest in the young people, and I'd also make a concentrated effort to have a organization within the National Democratic Party to help on this media outreach because Republicans have figured it out
They
between
really
social,
have.
between social media, the political action committees, and the alternative media. They've done a good job.
And
I
the
didn't.
Billionaires Boys Club, don't forget that.
Yes, and we're going to have, I hate to say it, but we're going to have money. We can't go to a knife fight with a plastic fork. We're going to have money. So we're going to have the Mark Cubans of the world to help us funding these efforts. Um, I don't know. The Supreme Court has basically opened everything up. So Democrats need to realize that we can't play by different rules. If Republicans are playing hardball, we're going to have to play hardball with them because I think the American people have shown that they're willing to reward Republicans for the way they do conduct these campaigns. So Democrats better get wise to the game.
You've been listening to No Holding Back with me, Susan Estrich. I'd like to take a moment to thank Chris Jackson, who is my vote for the future. I don't know if you can get elected in Tennessee, but you ought to get elected somewhere. You've
Well, thank you,
got a
Susan.
voice and a message that I think Democrats need to hear, and we need to be able to be competitive in
Yeah.
places like Tennessee. If you enjoyed the show, make sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode. You can listen to us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts, most of which are conservative, which you're right. I mean, the podcast world is all conservative. So you can
Yeah.
also watch every one of our episodes on our YouTube channel It really helps us reach more listeners. If you leave a review, you send it to your followers, let us know. Follow us on X. We're on X at No Holding Back FM. And for my weekly column, visit our website, estrichgolden.com. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you to Chris. We wish you best of health for the new year, and all of you, Happy New Year. And see you next time on No Holding Back.